is that you can have a long sentence that contains within it many propositions. There's no ambiguity, it's just that the sentence has more than one proposition that's being expressed. Obviously this can happen because one of the great things about languages, English certainly one of them, is that you can take two sentences and make one sentence. Using what? Conjunctions. Yes, conjunctions are grammatical features that are like sentence glue. They are ways of sticking two sentences together and making one sentence. But if you have two sentences, each of which expresses a proposition, and you make one sentence, you've still got two propositions. So if I say today is Wednesday, that's a proposition, and I say this is logic, this class is logic, that's a proposition. But if I say it all in one, today is Wednesday and this is logic, there's still two propositions. So the number of sentences is not the same as the number of propositions. Okay? All right. Now, give me an example of conjunctions. I mean, yeah, give me an example of, I'll say it again, give me an example of conjunctions. And is probably the simplest and most common. They're on the board? No, they aren't. What else?
Or.
Good memories. Therefore, yes. That one's actually something of we're going to call later an indicator word. That word helps to reveal logical structure. But, yes.
So.
Yet. Now, there are three, there are more. All of these are grammatically conjunctions, because grammatically a conjunction is simply sentence glue. Logically, though, they're very different, as we'll see, because they have different logical effects. And the three main types that we're going to distinguish among are and, or, and if, ... then. All of them are ways of joining two propositions together. I shoot you and you're dead. Two true things. I shoot you or you're dead. Don't know how that would happen. If I shoot you, then you're dead. Right? All of them are ways of joining two propositions together. One is I shoot you, that could be true or false. You're dead, that could be true or false. Maybe you die of fright when I pull out my fake gun. I'm English. We don't have guns. We don't know about guns. We're scared of guns, so you're safe. I think, yeah, what did they say? That the number of times the British police in total discharged a weapon was beaten by one police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. The number of times they discharged it in an entire year.
Most London police officers don't even carry weapons?
No police officers carry weapons except, small task forces. Police officers just don't carry, they carry sticks, and nowadays they carry tasers, so, don't piss off a police officer. But, no, in England we prefer stabbings, much more personal. No, it's true actually, the number of stabbings in London is quite scary. So. But at least, so stay fit and you should be okay. They are ways of joining propositions together. Now, one skill that we'll be practicing more in the next class is identifying how many propositions there are in a sentence. And there are ways that you can sort of multiply it beyond usefulness. But for now, we will note that you can have a single sentence. If it involves a grammatical conjunction, there will be at least two propositions. There are minor exceptions. So for example, the word and can actually be used not as a conjunction, as for example, when you're talking about like a firm, like Johnson & Johnson. The baby powder was Johnson & Johnson, right? You don't have two propositions there. The and there is just part of the name, right? But in most cases where and is being used, it is being used to join two sentences together, and you have a proposition each. Okay. Now, when you just have, there are two things that a sentence can do to a proposition. As we've seen, some sentences don't even express a proposition. What kind of sentences don't express a proposition? Questions, commands, those guys. All right, but the ones we're interested in logic do express propositions. What does it mean for a sentence to express a proposition? It means that there's a connection, that a proposition is connected. Propositions are weird metaphysical entities. They're not the same as sentences. You can't trip over them, but in some sense they exist. So a sentence expresses a proposition if there's some connection between the sentence and that proposition. If you can think of a sentence as related to a proposition. That's not very clear, but I think the main point is to distinguish it from asserting. A proposition can also assert, a sentence can also assert a proposition. Now, I drew a handy little graph here, or chart, to represent the relationship between expressed propositions and asserted ones. All asserted propositions are also expressed, but not all expressed propositions are asserted. Okay? So first of all, you work out if there's a proposition there at all. If your sentence is a question, there's no proposition. But suppose you have a declarative sentence that appears to be saying something. Then it expresses at least one proposition. Does it also assert that proposition? Well, a sentence asserts a proposition when you know that the proposition is true as a result of the sentence. That's not an ideal definition, but I think it will do. Okay, so we've been looking at short examples, like today is Wednesday. Does that sentence assert that it is Wednesday? Yes, because if I tell you that the whole sentence is true, then it is true that it is Wednesday, right? So, and in general, here's a general rule that you could write down. If there's only one proposition involved, then it is both expressed and asserted. So for all short sentences, they both express and assert their propositions. The difficulty arises when you have a longer sentence that expresses more than one proposition. When that happens, it's possible that at least one of those propositions is not asserted. As, for example, in the case of conjunctions. So, for example, suppose I say, well, let me ask you now. Suppose I say, there are coins in my pocket and there are keys in my pocket. How many propositions are there? 2. Are they both expressed? Yes. If you can count them, they're expressed. Right? If they're there, they're expressed. Are they both asserted by that sentence? So the sentence is, there are coins in my pocket and there are keys in my pocket. Is there are coins in my pocket asserted? Yes. If I tell you that the whole thing is true, do you know that there are coins in my pocket?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Is there are keys in my pocket asserted? Yes. Again, if I tell you the whole thing is true, do you know there are keys in my pocket? Yes. So what that tells us about and is when you have two propositions, let's call them P and Q, we'll be doing a lot more of that later, both propositions are asserted. Obviously they're both expressed, but are they also asserted? Yes. And this happens with all words that work exactly like and. What is another word that works exactly like and?
Also.
Also, yes. But. The only difference between but and is what? Why is it sometimes appropriate to say but instead of and?
Because it's excluding something.
Not really excluding.
Is it conditional?
Well, how about this? which would be more appropriate? And or but. I was run over by a 6-ton truck, I survived.
But
Why? What's that?
Unexpected.
It's unexpected, yeah. So in other words, it's when the second one is surprising in light of the first. So, like, I ate my dinner and then I went out. You wouldn't say, I ate my dinner, but I went out, dun dun dun, you know, unless it was a massive dinner and a tiny door to go out. I don't know. But if it's, you know, like I fell off a 7-story building, but I survived, you would say but. But in general, they work the same logically. Both are asserted. If I say I fell off a 7-story building, but I survived, I would be asserting both of them. Okay? What about or? Suppose I say, there are coins in my pocket or there are keys in my pocket. And I tell you, this is a true sentence. There are coins in my pocket or there are keys in my pocket. Does the truth of that sentence guarantee that there are coins in my pocket?
no.
Does the truth of that sentence guarantee that there are keys in my pocket?
No.
No. So what does that mean? It means that neither P nor Q is asserted. They're both expressed, because they're always expressed. If they're there, they're expressed. But they're not asserted. Now, there is something that is asserted, and that is the whole thing. Because the whole thing is also a proposition. Because it can be true or false. Is it true that there are either coins or keys in my pocket? What would make it false that there are either keys or coins in my pocket? If there are neither keys nor coins. And we'll get into the truth values of sentences like this later on. Truth tables, yes. More fun than a barrel full of monkeys. But only because a barrel full of monkeys is not fun. Alright. Finally we have if then. If there are coins in my pocket, then there are keys in my pocket. Suppose I tell you that that's true. Do you know that there are coins in my pocket?
Yes.
Yes or no?
No.
No. Do you know that there are keys in my pocket?
No.
No. So what does that tell us? What does that tell us about P and Q here? Neither or neither are asserted. So in other words, if and then is like or, not like and. Okay, now there are other circumstances that might make something expressed but not asserted. Suppose I say, I believe the children are the future. Suppose I were to say that. There are actually two propositions there. One of them is the whole thing. That's a statement about my beliefs, right? What would make that sentence true or false is what I believe, right? If I believe the children are the future, then it's true. If I don't believe that, then it's false. What's the other proposition? The fact that the children are the future. Now, is the children are the future asserted or not in the context of I believe the children are the future?
No.
It's not. How can we show that? Because you can imagine I believe the children are the future being true without it being true that the children are the future, right?
I believe.
What's that?
The belief.
Yes, because you can believe false things, right? I believe that I'm going to win $1 million. I'm clinging to that belief. Now, what about if I change the word believe to know? What if I said, I know that I have keys in my pocket? If I tell you that, if that whole sentence is in fact true, do you know that there are keys in my pocket?
Yes.
Yes!
Because you know.
So why is that different? What's the difference between know and believe? Yes?
Knows a fact and believes it.
Yes. No, you cannot know something false. If it turns out that it was false, then you didn't know it. You just thought you knew. You can believe false things, but you can't know false things. So if it is true that I knew that, Joe Bob was the murderer, then Joe Bob was the murderer. But if I believe that Joe Bob was the murderer, he might be innocent. All right, let's look at, just before I let you go, let's look at the examples on page 71. By next time, you will all have your books. That is a statement of fact. I am asserting that. Yes, well, most of you do have the book. I mean the textbook.
There's another letter.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that. I will tell you off for that in the appropriate place. Brandon, can you read number 1 of C on page 71?
I don't care whether it rains.
Now notice, this is like what I was just talking about. The whole sentence is one proposition. I don't care whether it rains. That's a statement about my feelings, right? Whereas it rains is also a proposition. It can be true or false. Normally we would say it is raining. That's just a quirk of English. But is it rains asserted in the context of that sentence? Why not? What's that? Because the test is, suppose you know the sentence is true. Suppose you know I really don't care. Does that prove that it's raining? No, it doesn't, because I might not know whether it's raining. It's just a case where it's not asserting that it's raining.
Thank you.
Okay, so in that case, it's expressed, of course, because it's there, but it's not asserted. Hunter, number 2.
I could fly if I had wings.
They'd have to be freaking big wings. Now, not just you, just anybody. That always pisses me off about superheroes with wings. Like, they would have to be like the size of the building to be able to lift a human. I mean, like the biggest bird ever weighs a ridiculously small amount compared with us. Yeah, like, but anyway, don't get me started on wings. All right. I had wings. Is that asserted or not asserted? Suppose it's true that I could fly if I had wings of the correct size. I would also have to have giant muscles to move, but I don't want to get into that. If that sentence is true, does it prove that I have wings?
No.
No. So in other words, that I had wings is expressed but not asserted. That's a pretty poor chorus there, but it'll make me better next time. Finally, the prosecution said the butler committed the murder, but in fact the butler was out playing bingo that night. So the whole thing is the sentence. In the context of that sentence is, the butler was out playing bingo that night. Is it asserted, Jamie? If you know that the whole thing is true, do you know that the butler was out playing bingo? Yes, so it is asserted because it's got but, which works like and.